right, we will continue our lab discussion of the muscular system, looking at the objectives on the second half of page 21, the bottom half, starting with the iliopsoas muscle and ending with the soleus. So we're going to start by looking at the back side of the leg, looking at the gluteus maximus. The gluteus maximus is this large muscle that otherwise known as the buttocks. That's the gluteus maximus. And there's also a gluteus medius. If you look down a couple of terms on page 21 there, it's underneath the tensor fasciae lata. It's about 6-7 terms down. So you have the gluteus maximus here and the gluteus medius above. So gluteus maximus, gluteus medius. And these muscles are very important in extending the leg at the hip. So bringing your leg backward behind the body is called extending the leg at the hip. So that's the gluteus maximus action. And the action of the gluteus medius is to abduct the thigh. So if you stand with your legs straight up and down, if you bring your one leg out straight to the side, just take your ankles, put them together, and then slowly lift your left or right leg and move it out to the side. That's abducting the thigh. And the gluteus medius muscle is a really important muscle to keep strong. If someone, for example, is a runner, sometimes weak gluteus medius muscle can cause hip pain. So that's a good exercise is to just abduct the thigh, bring the leg out to the side and back again to strengthen that gluteus medius muscle and strengthen the hip for people that like to run, long distances. So that's the gluteus maximus and the gluteus medius. On the front side of the leg are a number of muscles. The iliopsoas muscle, the P is silent, and the iliopsoas muscle is actually made up of two muscles here. So here's the two iliopsoas muscles. They each have a separate name, but just know them together as the iliopsoas muscles. And the job of the iliopsoas is to flex the hip. So you're bringing the knee upward, bending the hip as you bring the knee up. And again, this is another muscle that can cause hip pain in runners that are not doing a good strengthening program as part of their training. They end up with hip pain as a result of a weak iliopsoas muscle. So it's really important to strengthen the muscles around the hip and the knee to keep yourself healthy if you're going to participate in long distance running. And we know that there are some people that can run long distances and participate in marathons into their 70s if they are doing good muscle strengthening to help support those joints, so there's not too much movement at the joint, and that would contribute to breakdown of cartilage, leading to pain, inflammation, and arthritis. So that's the iliopsoas muscle. And then if we look at the muscles on the front of the thigh, there's 4 muscles, and we call these 4 muscles together the quadriceps muscles, or the quads, but you only need to know 3 of those 4 muscles. So the best way to find these muscles is to go to the knee and then look at the tendon that attaches directly to the patella here, and that leads to the rectus femoris. So it runs straight up and down in the front of the leg, attaches to the patella here on the top portion. That's the rectus femoris. And then either side of that are the 2 vastus muscles. If we're on the outside of the leg, the lateral side of the leg, that's the vastus lateralis. And if we look on the inside of the leg, this is the vastus medialis. So you have vastus lateralis, rectus femoris, vastus medialis, and use your knee as kind of your reference point for finding these muscles. There's another muscle that lies deeper. It's called the vastus intermedius, and that is a muscle you're not responsible for, but that is the 4th muscle that makes up the quadriceps group. Also on the front of the leg is the longest muscle, I should say, in the body. It starts on the outside of the hip and travels across the front of the leg and attaches on the inside of the knee. This is called the sartorius muscle. And we call this the Taylor's muscle because it allows you to, if you look at its action, flex the hip and knee and rotate the leg. So it allows you to bend your knee upward and rotate it, as in when you are crossing your legs. Like if you cross one leg over the other when you're sitting in a chair, that's the sartorius muscle that pulls that knee over the other leg. So this is the sartorius muscle. These fibers, these muscle cells, are very long, so the beginning of the muscle cells starts here and stretches all the way down to the inside of the knee. So very long muscle fibers, the longest muscle in the body. It's the sartorius muscle, and it comes across the front of the leg at an angle here. Also, looking at the functions or actions of these three of the four quadricep muscles, if we look at the actions, it is to extend the leg at the knee. So when you straighten your leg from a bent position, that's with the help of the quadricep muscles. As these muscles shorten, it pulls on the lower leg and pulls it outward. Then looking on the side of the outer side of the leg over the hip, starting at the hip and working its way down, is the tensor fasciolata. The tensor fasciolata is made up of a lot of fascia. So if you think of fasciolata, thinking of a lot of fascia, fascia is connective tissue here on the outside. So there's just a little bit of muscle here and then all this big stretch of connective tissue running down the side of the leg. So a very long tendon here. And that's where it gets its name, tensor fasciolata. And again, if people don't stretch out their hips properly, they can end up with some tightening of this and causing a lot of hip pain on the side of the hip. So it's important to definitely stretch out this tensor fasciolata to keep the hip mobile and keep the lower leg, flexible. So tensor fasciolata running along the outside of the leg. Then we move to the back side of the leg. Oh, I shouldn't say that. There's one more that you should look at, and that's the adductor longus muscle. If we look at the front side of the leg here, we see the sartorius muscle here. And on the inside of the leg is another muscle, the gracilis. So the gracilis is a thin muscle that runs down the inside of the leg here. Tensor fasciolata on the outside of the leg. So these two muscles, if you look at their locations here, one is on the inside, one is on the outside. The gracilis muscle, its job is to adduct the thigh, so it brings the thigh inward toward the midline. And if you look at the function of the tensor fasciolata, that is to abduct the thigh, to bring the leg outward. So as in a jumping jack, when you bring the leg outward, that's the tensor fasciolata, and pulling it inward is the gracilis. And because the action of gravity really helps bring our leg back to the midline, this muscle is typically very weak, and it takes effort to develop the inside of the inner thigh, the gracilis muscles. So it takes special exercises to really keep this muscle strong. And that's why women in particular complain about having flabby thighs, especially on the inner thigh, because gravity really allows us to bring our legs to an upright position, keeping our feet together, so this muscle becomes very weak and doesn't work a whole lot. So it results in a lot of fat lying over that muscle. So looking at then the next one is the adductor longus. If you can find the gracilis, the adductor longus lies right next to it, right here. This is the adductor longus. And in looking at the function of the adductor longus, it is to adduct the thigh. So it has the same function as the gracilis muscle to bring that thigh inward. So the adductor longus is right next to the gracilis, and both of them bring the thigh inward or bring the leg inward to the midline. So these two muscles act together. They're kind of partners, so I would say it'd be smart to associate them together to make it a little easier to remember them. So gracilis and adductor longus. And then we move to the back side of the leg again, looking at the hamstring muscles. And the hamstring muscles refer to the muscles on the back side of the leg. And if you feel on the back side of your knee, this is the outside of your knee here, there's a thick tendon there on the outside of your knee. That leads to the large muscle on the back side of the leg, which is the biceps femoris. So remember, on the front side was the rectus femoris over the femur bone, somewhere in the upper part of the leg. This is the biceps femoris on the back side of the legs. Think of biceps back on the back side of the leg. And it's femoris. Remember, we looked at the biceps brachii in the arm. This is the biceps femoris over the femur. So you can feel that as a large tendon on the outside of your knee, the biceps femoris. And then on the inside of the knee, you feel two tendons. One is more easy to palpate than the other, or to feel on the inside of the knee. And the one underneath the two muscles, there's two muscles, one on top of the other. The one underneath is the semimembranosus. So the semimembranosus is here, and it's also on this side here. You can see how it has a wide tendon underneath here. So that's the semimembranosus. This is showing a little bit of it here, and then this is showing the rest of it here. So that's the semimembranosus. It is a wide muscle with a very short tendon. On top of that is the semitendinosus. So that's this muscle here. It's long and thin and has a long, thin tendon attached to it. So that's where it gets its name, semitendinosus, because it really has that tendon appearance here at the bottom as it attaches to the inside of the knee. So semimembranosus is underneath, much wider. So that's here and here. And then semitendinosus, the much thinner muscle lying over the top of the semimembranosus. And this is the tendon of the semitendinosus here. So while we're on the back side of the leg, there's another muscle to look at, and that is the adductor magnus. And the adductor magnus is on the other side of the gracilis. Just like we said, the adductor longus you could associate with the gracilis. Here on the back side is the adductor magnus. So here's the gracilis running down the inside of the thigh, this long, thin muscle. It's the gracilis, and right next to it is the adductor magnus. So gracilis, adductor magnus. This would be semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, and this muscle here would be part of the iliotibial band coming off of the gluteus maximus, but we'll just focus on these muscles here for now. So gracilis, adductor magnus, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and biceps femoris. So looking again on the front side of the leg, I believe we've covered everything there. Again, here's the gracilis, and here's the adductor longus, sartorius, rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and tensor fasciolata. So here's some pictures of the different leg models that you might see in lab. It's important that you be able to identify the muscles we talked about here depending on the view. Remember, on the outside of the leg is the tensor fasciolata, so I can see that here. Looking at the inside of the leg here, I can see the gracilis with the adductor magnus on the one side and adductor longus on the other side. Remember, this is a posterior muscle, this is an anterior muscle, and the gracilis runs down the middle. Here I can see the sartorius coming across here. I can see it better here, coming from the outside of the hip to the inside of the knee. So that's the sartorius. Here I can see the rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and let's see what else we can see. Gluteus maximus here. Looking on the back side, I can see the biceps femoris. I can see the semitendinosus over the top of the semimembranosus, which we can see underneath it there. So those are the muscles of the leg. Then we get to the lower leg. And on the front side of the leg is the tibialis anterior. So that tells us that it lies over the tibia bone, and it is, or attaches to the tibia bone, and it's on the anterior side of the leg. That's this muscle here, the tibialis anterior. Muscle here attaching to the tibia on the front side of the leg. And then we have, on the back side of the leg, we have the gastrocnemius. We know this as the calf muscle. So this is the gastrocnemius, and it attaches via a tendon, a long tendon, to the back side of the heel, to the calcaneus. And this is what we call the Achilles tendon. So as we age, again, tendons can become very tight, muscles can atrophy, and if they're not well stretched prior to exercise, we can find tears in these tendons that will cause dysfunction in the muscle and a lot of pain. So it's important that we stretch our Achilles tendon prior to exercise, especially runners. They can get a tear where this will actually pull away from the heel. This usually happens, for people that are in their, say, over 40, that are not stretching properly. But with good stretching, you can definitely keep this tendon intact. So Achilles tendon attaching to the gastrocnemius. If you look at the functions of the gastrocnemius, we can see that it is to plantar flex the foot, which means to point the foot downward. So as it pulls on the heel, the toe drops down. So when you point your toe, you're using the gastrocnemius. The action of the tibialis anterior is to pull the toe upwards, to push the toes to the nose, so that when this shortens, pulls on the front side of the foot and brings the toes up toward the nose. So this means to dorsiflex, and to work this muscle is to plantar flex. Underneath the gastrocnemius, it's hard to see in a front view, you have to look on a side view. So underneath the gastroc here is another muscle called the soleus. It works with the gastrocnemius, again, to pull the heel upward to allow us to point our foot. So look for this muscle kind of glued in our models. It usually looks like it's pretty tightly adhered underneath the gastrocnemius. But notice that it does not have a long tendon as it attaches down to the heel here. So this is the soleus muscle underneath the gastrocnemius. And that concludes our lab discussion of the muscular system. I want to definitely call your attention to the pictures that I've included for you guys to use as practice looking at the models. We have a picture of the torso muscles that are nicely labeled here, and it comes with a key to help you practice, and then it comes unlabeled if you wanted to make flashcards or work with these in any way, whatever you see fit for study purposes. So these are the different pictures you're going to see. So this is a musculature of the torso that's nicely labeled for you, has a nice answer key. We have some of the leg here as well. So if you look through here, you can see there's some nice pictures here. Some are labeled, some are not labeled. You have a nice answer key showing you multiple views of the leg. And there's another one of the arm. And that is, let's see, I think this one is nope, not that one. It's in the resources that I put in that folder for lab, so I don't see it here on the bottom of my screen, but anyway, it's available, and I definitely recommend working through those pictures. That concludes our discussion of the